The sky was clear, and the sun was setting over a quiet suburban neighborhood. A spaceship, glowing faintly with strange blue lights, descended slowly, almost like it was afraid to land. The ship's sleek silver body reflected the last rays of the sun, making it look like it didn't belong. It wasn't from this world, and yet it was about to make its presence known. Inside the spaceship, an alien girl named Zira sat nervously. She had never been to Earth before, and everything around her seemed so unfamiliar. Her hands trembled as she looked out from the small window of her ship. The landscape was like nothing she had ever seen. The trees, the houses, and the roads all seemed strange and overwhelming. Zira had traveled far from her home planet, a place that was peaceful, calm, and organized. But Earth was chaotic. There were so many humans, and they were always moving around, busy with things that didn't make sense to her. She had heard of humans before, but she never expected their world to be so confusing. As the ship touched down, Zira unbuckled her seatbelt and took a deep breath. Her planet had trained her for this moment. She was prepared for first contact. She was here to learn about humans, about their ways, and hopefully to bring back knowledge that could help her people. But as the ship's hatch opened, she felt something she hadn't expected: fear. The moment her feet touched the earth, Zira froze. The ground beneath her was solid, but it felt different, as if it was alive in its own way. The grass under her feet swayed gently in the wind, and the sound of birds chirping echoed around her. She looked around, scanning the area. This place was so noisy, yet strangely quiet at the same time. Her heart raced as she stepped out of the spaceship. The air smelled unfamiliar, not like the clean air of her planet. It had a strange mix of scents, something sweet, something salty, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Her mind raced with thoughts. What should I do first? She wondered. She had no idea where to start. Zira took a cautious step forward, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She saw a strange, small box-like structure on the side of the street, standing alone. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. It had walls, a door, and a window. It seemed to be made of a material she couldn't recognize. She approached it slowly, her curiosity overtaking her fear. The closer she got, the more it seemed to glow with a strange energy. As she stood in front of this small structure, a few humans appeared from a nearby house. They were walking towards her, chatting among themselves, not noticing her presence at first. Zira panicked. She wasn't ready to speak to humans yet. They might be dangerous? She quickly hid behind the structure. Trying to stay out of sight. From behind the structure, Zira watched the humans. They seemed so normal. There was nothing special about them, nothing that screamed danger. She could hear their voices clearly now, and they were speaking in a language she couldn't understand. The sounds they made were sharp and fast, unlike the smooth tones of her planet. But it didn't matter. She wasn't here to study their language. She was here to understand their technology. After a few moments, the humans passed by, not noticing the alien girl hiding behind the structure. Zira let out a sigh of relief, but her sense of peace was short-lived. As she peeked around the structure, her eyes caught something else, something even more strange and terrifying. At the base of the structure, Zira saw a strange object. It looked like a seat, but there were no controls. It was smooth and white, unlike anything she had ever seen. But what terrified her wasn't just the appearance of the object, it was the strange sound coming from it. A low, gurgling noise echoed from underneath the seat, and it sounded alive. The noise made Zira's skin crawl. "What is this?" she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. "Is this some sort of trap?" Without thinking, Zira moved closer to the strange object. She leaned down and touched it, feeling its smooth surface under her fingers. The moment her hand made contact, she heard a loud flush. The seat made a strange whooshing sound, and water began swirling inside, as if trying to pull something in. Zira jumped back, her heart racing. The sight of the water swirling down into the seat horrified her. What kind of technology was this? She had never seen anything like it. The strange object looked like a regular seat, yet it seemed to have a mind of its own. Her instincts screamed that she needed to leave, but her curiosity kept her rooted to the spot. She took a deep breath and leaned forward again, cautiously inspecting the object. Her mind raced. Was this some sort of alien trap designed to confuse her? She couldn't understand why humans would need such a strange and dangerous device. It made no sense. And yet, here it was, right in front of her. Zira stepped back once more, her mind swirling with thoughts. I need to figure this out, she thought. I need to understand what this is and how it works. But as she stood there, lost in thought, she heard footsteps again. The humans were coming back. Panic set in once more. Zira had to hide before they saw her, but it was too late. One of the humans turned the corner and saw her standing there, staring at the strange seat. The human's eyes widened in shock. For a moment, Zira and the human just stared at each other, neither sure what to do. Then, with a quick motion, the human turned and ran inside the house, shouting for someone to come out. Zira, feeling even more confused than before, looked back. At the strange seat, her heart still racing. What had just happened? Why was this world so strange? The questions piled up, but one thing was certain. She had only just begun to understand the terrifying and bewildering world of humans. And this was only the beginning. Zira stood frozen, her heart thudding in her chest. The human she had seen run inside the house was now gathering others. Her sharp alien senses could detect the rustle of hurried footsteps and the sound of doors opening, followed by voices calling out. A strange feeling of being trapped crept over her, as if the world around her was closing in. The humans weren't supposed to notice her yet. She wasn't ready for this kind of interaction. Her mission was to observe, not to expose herself. Her eyes darted around for an escape, but the world around her felt like it was closing in. She was in a foreign world, with no one who could understand her, and certainly no one who could help. The voices were getting closer. They were speaking rapidly in their strange tongue, each word foreign and sharp, almost like they were in a hurry. Zira's heart skipped a beat as the first human appeared at the edge of the yard, a man holding something in his hand. He was looking right at her. His eyes locked onto hers, wide with confusion, and then quickly narrowed with suspicion. Zira instinctively took a step back, but her feet tangled with the grass and she stumbled, falling slightly. In an instant, the human was at her side, reaching out a hand to steady her. The kindness in his gesture was not lost on Zira, but she couldn't stop herself from recoiling. She didn't trust them. This was too soon. Are you okay? The man asked. His voice soft but laced with curiosity. He was speaking the same strange language, and Zira could not understand a word, but his tone seemed kind, and that made her pause. She had never met a human before, and now here she was, face to face with one. What was she supposed to do? Before she could respond, not that she knew how, a woman came out from behind him, her face filled with concern. She looked at Zira, then at the man, and her gaze settled back on the alien girl. What is she? The woman asked in disbelief. The man didn't answer right away, his eyes still fixed on Zira. I don't know, he stammered. She just appeared out of nowhere. Zira took a cautious step back. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, but she didn't want to be caught. She had no idea how to communicate, no way to explain who she was, where she came from, or why she was here. She couldn't even begin to understand their world, not in a way that made sense. The woman moved a little closer. Are you lost? She asked, still unsure of what was happening. The tone in her voice was warm, but there was no real understanding. Zira could tell that the woman was trying to be friendly, trying to make sense of the strange situation they all found themselves in. But how could Zira answer? She didn't know how to speak their language. She couldn't even understand their words. A strange, heavy silence hung in the air as Zira stared at them. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. She knew she had to act fast. The longer she stayed, the more they would want to know. They would ask questions she couldn't answer. They would press for answers she didn't have. The man spoke. Again, this time slowly and cautiously, as if he were trying to make sure she understood him. Are you hurt? His eyes searched her body for any signs of injury. Zira could tell that he was concerned, but it only made her more anxious. The last thing she wanted was for them to feel pity for her. In a sudden burst of frustration, Zira raised her hand. The air crackled with tension as her eyes locked onto the humans. She didn't know why she did it, but it was a reflex. She had learned that, when surrounded by unknown threats, sometimes showing strength was the best option. The gesture startled both the man and the woman, who took a step back, eyes wide in surprise. Zira's pulse quickened. She hadn't meant to come off as threatening, but the way they reacted made her feel even more out of place. They didn't know who she was, what she was capable of. How could she make them understand? How could she explain that she was not a threat, just an alien far from home, trying to understand their world? The silence lingered for a moment longer before the man slowly raised both of his hands in a gesture of peace. He wasn't frightened, at least not outwardly, but there was still confusion in his eyes. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're not going to hurt you." Zira watched him carefully, her instincts telling her to be cautious, but her curiosity also urging her to lower her guard. She studied the man, noticing the details of his face, his clothing, and the way he moved. He was just like any other human, yet there was something different about him, something human. She hadn't expected it, but there was a warmth in his eyes. Something about him didn't feel like a threat. The woman stepped forward again, her face softening. "Do you understand us?" she asked, this time speaking slowly and clearly. Zira couldn't understand the words, but the tone was different now. It was filled with kindness, perhaps. Perhaps these humans weren't so dangerous after all. Zira's mind raced. She had never encountered such a situation before. She didn't know how to respond, but her instincts told her to trust the woman. She took a small, cautious step forward, her eyes never leaving the humans. She couldn't speak their language, but there was something about their presence, their peaceful intentions, that made her feel, for the first time since landing, not entirely alone. The man and woman exchanged a glance, and then the man spoke again, this time with a more reassuring smile. "It's okay," he said, his voice calmer now. "We'll help you." Zira nodded slowly, the uncertainty still heavy in her chest. But for the first time she felt a flicker of hope. She had made the first connection with a human. She didn't know what would happen next. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn from them and in turn help her people. With that thought, Zira stood straighter, her shoulders less tense. She had crossed the first hurdle, but she knew there was so much more ahead. This strange world was just beginning to reveal itself to her, and she wasn't sure what to expect. But one thing was clear: the journey had just begun. Zira stood silently, her eyes darting from the humans to the world around her. They had invited her into their home, offering her food and warmth, yet all she could think about was the strange contraptions that filled the room. Her gaze landed on a large rectangular object sitting in the corner of the room. It had a glass surface and glowing symbols on it. The humans seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time staring at it, pressing buttons, and talking to each other as it flashed and beeped. Zira's curiosity got the best of her. She had studied the humans from afar, but seeing their technology up close was something entirely different. It was nothing like the tools of her world. Everything here was unpredictable, chaotic, and, in some cases, downright baffling. The large glass screen in the corner made a noise, a strange sound that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. She flinched, instinctively taking a step back, unsure whether it was about to do something dangerous. The human man, who had introduced himself as Thomas, watched her with an amused expression as she studied the device. "You're curious, huh?" he asked, his tone light. But Zira didn't respond. She couldn't speak their language, and she wasn't sure how to explain her thoughts. She only nodded, hoping they wouldn't take it as a sign of weakness. With a slow, deliberate motion, Thomas stood up and walked over to the device. He pressed a series of buttons, and the screen lit up even brighter, filling the room with an odd glow. Zira's eyes widened in awe. What kind of machine was this? It made sounds like music, lights that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the noise, and ... What was that? There were moving images on the screen, humans doing strange activities, running, laughing, even fighting. The images changed every few seconds, too quickly for her to fully process. Thomas seemed to notice her reaction. "You don't get it, do you?" he said with a chuckle. "This is a TV. It's single quotes entertainment. Humans use it to pass time." Zira's mind was racing. Entertainment? She had heard of such things in her training, but the idea of watching images change and stories unfold before her eyes seemed impossible. This wasn't just a simple device, it was magic to her. Something she couldn't grasp. She stepped closer to the screen, reaching out to touch it. But before she could make contact, the screen flashed a bright red warning sign, and a loud noise erupted from the device. Zira recoiled, her heart skipping a beat. What had she done? The humans had looked startled for a moment before laughing. Thomas reached out and tapped the screen, turning off the noise. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm but amused. "It's just a TV, not a weapon." Zira frowned, her confusion growing. What kind of device could make such an alarming sound? And how was it supposed to be used for something as simple as entertainment? She had seen her people's tools, perfectly designed, efficient, and purposeful. But this, it seemed like a toy, random and strange. She turned away from the TV, only to notice something even more bizarre, a small, rectangular box on the table in front of her. It had buttons, a few flickering lights, and a strange symbol that resembled a curved arrow. Thomas, noticing her gaze, smiled again. "This, my friend, is a remote control. It lets you change the channel on the TV." Zira tilted her head, staring at the object. A remote control? It didn't make sense. A tiny box could control the large screen in front of her. This wasn't just technology, it was sorcery to her eyes. "Here," Thomas said, picking up the remote. "Let me show you." He pressed one of the buttons, and the screen flickered, changing to a new image, then another, and another. Each image was stranger than the last. Zira's mind struggled to keep up. She couldn't understand why humans would waste their time on something like this. In her world, every tool had a purpose, a function. Every object was a means to an end. But this was an endless stream of images, sounds, and distractions. She didn't know what to make of it. Why? Zira's voice came out as a whisper, unsure if anyone would understand her question. Thomas looked at her in confusion, not understanding the weight of her question. "Why what?" he asked. "Why do you need this?" Zira's eyes swept over the screen again, feeling a strange mixture of fascination and frustration. Why watch? Why waste time on this? Thomas paused, clearly caught off guard by the question. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. "Well, it's fun, I guess. People like to relax with it. It helps them unwind." Zira shook her head, her confusion deepening. "Unwind?" She repeated the word, trying to make sense of it. In her world, everything had a goal, a purpose. Why not just do something? The man chuckled, clearly amused by her question. "I guess that's what humans do sometimes. We need to relax, to escape from the world." Escape? Zira was struck by the word. Escape from what? Why would they need to escape? On her planet, there was no need to run away from reality. Everything was harmonious, structured. But here, in this strange world, the humans seemed to be constantly escaping. She looked down at the remote, then back at Thomas. He noticed the intensity in her gaze and realized that she wasn't just asking a casual question. She was struggling to understand the very essence of human existence. For a moment, their worlds collided in that small, quiet room. The tension in the air was palpable as Zira turned her attention to something else on the table. A sleek, metal device, much like a tool, caught her eye. It had buttons and a smooth surface, resembling something she might understand. Zira reached for it, intrigued. "This," Thomas explained, noticing her interest, "is a phone. It's how humans communicate." Zira blinked, looking at the phone with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. It didn't look like anything from her world, but it might be more useful than this strange television. She picked it up carefully, almost reverently pressing one of the buttons. The foam buzzed to life in her hands and her eyes widened as it lit up. She pressed another button and a voice suddenly echoed from it, startling her. It was a human talking, but it wasn't anyone in the room. She jumped back, dropping the phone in surprise. The noise was too much for her. The sound seemed to be coming from nowhere, and it confused her more than anything else. This was far beyond what she had imagined. Zira felt overwhelmed. The world she had stepped into was filled with strange gadgets, mysterious tools, and baffling distractions. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Her training on Earth had prepared her for first contact, but this was something else. Entirely. Nothing could have prepared her for the chaos and unpredictability of human technology. For a moment, she stood still, surrounded by devices she didn't understand, in a world that seemed to exist without reason. The questions flooded her mind. How could humans live like this? How could they understand this madness? And yet, despite the confusion, Zira knew one thing for certain. She was no longer a passive observer. She had stepped into their world, and she had to figure out how it worked. The world around Zira was still overwhelming, but something strange had begun to take shape in her mind. After her baffling interaction with the television and phone, she couldn't help but feel a strong pull to understand more. But it wasn't just the flashing lights and odd machines that intrigued her. No, there was something much more peculiar and terrifying lurking in the corner of the human's house. It wasn't the towering machines or the complex gadgets that caught her attention. No, this time it was something far simpler. Something that sat quietly in a room, seemingly ordinary but filled with the promise of confusion and panic. The toilet. Zira had noticed it when she first entered the house, but hadn't paid much attention to it. It was just a small, white fixture. In the corner of a room, a seat of sorts. But the more she thought about it, the more the idea of this thing gnawed at her curiosity. It was a strange human artifact. And if there was one thing Zira had learned about this world, it was that everything had a deeper mystery. As the humans moved around the house, Zira ventured toward the room once again. She approached the toilet. Slowly, her footsteps tentative. It was the only object that still made her feel uneasy, yet she couldn't look away from it. There was something about the way it stood there so innocently, just waiting, that filled her with dread. She remembered the first time she had seen the toilet flush, the strange, powerful sound that seemed to echo through her bones, the swirling water, the rush of noise, the rapid movement that made her recoil in fear. What kind of contraption was this? Why would the humans need something so unpredictable? In her world, everything was understood. Every object was designed with a clear purpose in mind. But this? Zira crouched down in front of it and studied the smooth porcelain surface. She reached out a tentative hand to touch it, her fingers grazing the edge. The surface was cool to the touch, much like the machines she had seen earlier, but it wasn't like any device she had encountered. It didn't have buttons or controls. There were no markings, no labels, just a simple hollow bowl that seemed to invite her in like a strange, silent beast. As her fingers brushed against the porcelain, her mind raced with questions. Was this a trap? Could it be some kind of weapon? Zira leaned closer to the toilet, her alien instincts telling her to stay cautious. She slowly knelt down, peering into the depths of the bowl. The air around it was thick with tension, as if the object itself was waiting for her to make a move. She couldn't shake the feeling that the moment she touched it, something terrible would happen. In a moment of hesitation, she pushed down on the lid and the sound of a light click filled the room. For a split second, nothing happened. But then, out of nowhere, a loud rush of water began swirling inside the bowl, spinning in a violent circle before disappearing into the depths. Zira gasped in horror and jumped back, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaking. She stared at the toilet as the water settled, its surface calm once again. Why would humans create something so strange? What was the purpose of this? She glanced around the room, as if expecting the humans to appear and explain it to her, but the house was quiet. Her confusion deepened. How could she possibly understand this? She hadn't even seen a machine with this kind of behavior. It wasn't just a tool, it wasn't just a device. It was an enigma. Zira's mind raced, trying to fit this object into the mental framework she had been taught. She'd studied human technology before her mission. She knew that Earth's tools were unlike the ones on her planet. They were often strange, but this toilet was beyond comprehension. Was it some kind of technology designed to purify or cleanse? Was it a tool for communication? She couldn't fathom what it could possibly be for. Her mind was spinning with the possibilities when suddenly a loud noise interrupted her thoughts. A human voice, the man, Thomas, was calling from the hallway. "Hey, Zira! Everything okay? In there?" Zira stood up quickly, feeling panic rise within her. She had spent too much time trying to decipher the toilet. There was no way she could explain herself, not when she didn't even understand what she was looking at. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should run, hide, or face the human directly. The thought of interacting with them made her uneasy. They had been kind so far, but there was something about this world that seemed predictable. With a deep breath, Zira made her decision. She wouldn't run. She would confront this strange world head-on, starting with the terrifying, confusing toilet. If she was going to survive here, she would have to learn. She had no choice. Just as she was about to turn to the door, Thomas appeared, standing in the doorway with a curious but friendly expression on his face. He paused, glancing at her, and then his gaze fell to the toilet. Zira could feel the heat rising in her face as if she were being caught in an awkward, intimate moment. She wasn't sure how to explain her fascination or why she had been so absorbed by the strange device. Zira?" Thomas asked, clearly noticing her discomfort. "You all right?" Zira's mouth opened, but no words came out. How could she explain that she was terrified of the toilet? How could she possibly make him understand that this was more than just a piece of human technology? It was a mystery that threatened everything she thought she knew about their world. After a long moment of silence, Thomas smiled gently. "It's okay," he said, stepping into the room. "It's not as scary as it looks, it's just a toilet. I can show you how it works if you want." Zira stared at him for a long time, uncertain, her mind still reeling with questions. How could something as simple as a toilet become so terrifying? Yet something about his voice, warm and reassuring, made her pause. Perhaps this was the beginning of understanding. She nodded slowly, her curiosity winning over her fear. She wasn't ready to face the unknown, but she was determined to understand. If she was going to be stranded on this strange, chaotic planet, she needed to unravel its secrets. Starting with this ridiculous toilet. The quiet stillness of the room hung heavily around Zira as she stared at the toilet, her mind racing with confusion. The mysterious bowl of swirling water was not something she had expected to face on her journey to Earth. It was just a simple object to the humans, but to her it seemed like an ancient puzzle, one she couldn't quite solve. She had spent hours trying to make sense of it, and now, for the first time, the humans were offering to help her. Thomas stood there, his face calm and patient, ready to guide her through this strange human ritual. Zira's heart beat faster as she tried to process the situation. Was she really about to let a human explain their technology to her? What if she made a mistake? What if she misunderstood their way of life? But there was no turning back now. She had to learn for her mission, for her people, and for the future. If she couldn't understand Earth's technology, how could she ever hope to help her planet understand the complexities of this world? The mystery of the toilet was just the beginning. Zira took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Don't worry," Thomas said softly, noticing her hesitation. "It's not as complicated as it looks. I'll show you how it works. You won't be the first to be confused by it." Zira nodded, but her thoughts were still racing. Thomas stepped closer to the toilet, crouching down in front of it as though it were a simple object in need of care. He pushed a small button on the side of the toilet, and a faint whirring sound echoed through the room. Zira leaned in, her eyes wide with both suspicion and fascination. The toilet made an odd mechanical noise as if something deep inside it was coming to life. Water swirled again, but this time it was slower, gentler, almost as though the machine was responding to Thomas's touch. Zero watched carefully, studying every movement, every flicker of action. It seemed as though the toilet wasn't just a machine, it was something alive. Something that listened and reacted to commands. I know it seems odd, Thomas continued, but you don't have to be scared. It's a very simple thing, really. It's just for cleaning up after yourself. Zero blinked, completely bewildered. Cleaning up? What did he mean? This was a machine that could swallow water, produce noise, and move with mechanical precision. Was it for some sort of waste disposal? Her people didn't use such devices. They had a different way of handling such matters, but the humans seemed so nonchalant about it. Why was this toilet so important to them? Her thoughts were interrupted when Thomas pushed another button, and the water surged again, quickly filling the bowl and swirling with strength. Zero took a step back, almost afraid that it would swallow her whole, but Thomas's calm presence kept her from running. There you go, he said with a satisfied smile. This is how it works. You just sit, and when you're finished, you push the button. The water does the rest. Zero's eyes were locked on the bowl, watching the water swirl down with an almost hypnotic quality. She was struck by how such a simple action could produce such a powerful effect. She couldn't help but wonder, how had the humans figured this out? What was their true understanding of the world if they had mastered this kind of technology? Wait, Zero whispered, her voice trembling as the pieces slowly clicked together in her mind. You mean ... you just sit here ... and it takes away everything? Thomas nodded, still smiling as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Exactly. It's a system that helps us manage waste. It's part of our sanitation process. It's all about keeping things clean. Zero's eyes widened. The idea of waste was something she understood, but the humans had made a machine to handle it for them. The realization was both simple and deeply profound. What kind of society would build something like this? Something so mundane, yet so essential? But even as she began to understand the purpose, Zero felt a wave of unease wash over her. Was it really that simple? How could humans rely on such an unpredictable mechanical device to manage such an important part of life? In her world, everything had been designed to work harmoniously, predictably. There was no room for surprises, no room for something as dangerous as a toilet that could suddenly swirl water and make loud noises. I still don't understand, Zira confessed, her voice low as she processed the concept. How? Is this ... possible? How do you know it will work every time? What if something goes wrong? Thomas smiled knowingly, as if he had expected her to ask. Well, we don't always get it right, he said with a laugh. Sometimes it gets clogged or the water doesn't work the way it should, but that's why we have plumbers and maintenance. It's just a part of life. We fix it and it keeps going. Zero was silent for a long moment. Plumbers, maintenance. In her world, nothing broke. Nothing needed fixing. But here on Earth, everything had a flaw, an imperfection. Even the most advanced technologies, like the toilet, required human intervention to keep running smoothly. Zira felt a sense of awe at how resilient humans were, how they accepted their imperfections and simply adapted. What about when it breaks down? Zira asked, still trying to process this strange reality. Do you just keep using it? Thomas chuckled, his expression warm. Well, no. If it breaks, we can't use it until it's fixed. That's why we take care of it. It's like any other part of our lives. If it stops working, we make it work again. It's not perfect, but it's ours. Zira's mind whirred with this new understanding. The toilet, with all its mechanical strangeness, was just another piece of the human puzzle. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. It didn't fit the picture of perfection that Zira was used to, but it had its place in this world. She could almost feel the weight of this realization pressing down on her. It was the first time she truly understood. Humans didn't need everything to be perfect. They just needed things to work, even if only for a time. Her thoughts were interrupted as Thomas stood up, stretching his arms with a satisfied sigh. Well, that's the basics of it. You'll get used to it. It's a little weird at first, but you'll get the hang of it. Zira nodded slowly, her mind still swimming. Get the hang of it. Could she really ever understand this world? Could she truly become a part of it? Looking down at the toilet, she realized that she wasn't just learning about technology. She was learning about humans themselves. Their imperfections, their systems of survival, their ways of adapting. She had always seen the human race as unpredictable and chaotic. But now she understood that, in their own way, they were incredibly resilient. And that perhaps was the most amazing thing of all, but there was still so much more to learn, so much more to discover. Zira sat quietly, her mind still buzzing with the strange complexity of the toilet. It was hard for her to believe that such a simple device could spark so many questions, but there it was as an enigma that she couldn't quite understand. As she tried to process everything, she felt the weight of her isolation on this strange planet. She had no one to talk to, no one who could explain this world to her. The humans were kind, but their way of life felt like a maze she couldn't navigate. Just as she was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of human technology, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Hey, Zira," Thomas called from the doorway, his tone softer than before. He stepped into the room with a gentle smile. "I know this might all seem a little strange, but you're doing great. It takes time to adjust to new things." Zira looked up at him, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. The past few hours had been a whirlwind, and she was still trying to make sense of the world she had landed in. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice quiet. "Everything is so predictable here. I don't know if I can ever get used to it." Thomas nodded sympathetically and sat down beside her. "It's okay, I get it. Earth can be overwhelming, especially when you're from somewhere so different. But don't worry, you don't have to figure everything out right away. We're here to help you, Zira." Zira's heart skipped a beat at his words. The humans had been kind to her since she arrived, but there was always that lingering sense of isolation. They spoke a language she couldn't fully understand, and their technology was so alien to her that it felt like a barrier she couldn't cross. But now, sitting beside Thomas, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a glimmer of hope. "You really want to help?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "But I don't even know where to start. There's so much I don't understand." Thomas smiled reassuringly. "That's okay. We don't expect you to understand everything right away. In fact, you don't have to do it alone. That's the whole point of being human. We help each other out." Zira's mind tried to grasp the idea of helping each other. On her planet, everything had always been about efficiency, about working toward a common goal. But humans? They didn't just function as individuals. They depended on each other, supported each other through confusion, mistakes, and growth. It was a concept she hadn't fully understood until now. "What do you mean?" Zira asked, genuinely curious. "How do you help each other?" "Well," Thomas began, "humans rely on teamwork a lot. Like when something goes wrong, like that toilet you just saw. It's not perfect, right? But when it breaks, we don't just leave it, we fix it together. There are people called plumbers who know how to repair things. They're like experts in understanding how stuff works. And when things get even more complicated, like with big problems, or if someone's struggling with something, humans work together. It's all about sharing knowledge, looking out for each other." Zira thought about this. On her planet, everyone had their role, their task, but there was no helping, no need for it. Everyone was self-sufficient, independent. But here, humans had this network of trust and cooperation that allowed them to thrive. Even when things weren't perfect, Zira felt her heart lighten a little. Maybe Earth didn't have the perfect harmony she was used to, but it had something else, something more raw, more messy, but still beautiful in its own way. Thomas noticed the look in her eyes and continued, "And that's what we're trying to do here. We're helping you because you're part of this now. Even though you don't understand everything, we can show you. We can be your guides." Zira looked at him, her chest tightening with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "But I don't even know where to begin." There's so much that single quotes s dot 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 wrong here. So many things I don't understand. Thomas chuckled softly. We all feel that way at first. It's not about understanding everything right away. It's about being open to learning, to trying new things, even when it feels impossible. Zira took a deep breath, taking in his words. She wasn't used to feeling this vulnerable, to admitting that she didn't know everything. On her planet, everyone was expected to have answers. There was no room for uncertainty, no space for mistakes. But here, Thomas was telling her it was okay to not know, to not understand. In fact, that was part of the process. Okay, Zira said slowly, nodding to herself. I'll try to learn, Thomas smiled warmly. That's the spirit. He stood up, offering her a hand. How about we start with something simple? You can come with me and I'll show you how to use the kitchen. It's one of the most basic things humans do, but it might help you get used to the rhythm of Earth. Zira hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but something in his voice made her believe that she could do this. She wasn't alone anymore. She had someone to guide her, someone to help her understand. And that, she realized, was the most important thing she could have hoped for. As they walked toward the kitchen, Zira couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet excitement. For the first time since she had landed on Earth, she wasn't just a visitor, she was beginning to be part of something. Something real, something imperfect, but also something full of potential. And that made all the difference.